In a second-hand set of dimensions, on an astral plane that was never meant to fly, through wavering star mists, see the Great Atuin. Drifting onwards through space, atop the shell of the world's turtle, are 4 giant elephants, upon whose broad shoulders rests the Discworld. Welcome to Dining Table Discworld. We're reading through the Discworld novels and discussing them at our dining table. Be aware there will be spoilers for the current book and others in the series.
Hello, welcome to Dining Table Discworld. I'm Dave.
I'm Kathy.
And today, after our short break last time for our halfway through second quarter retrospective, we are back onto the main series. And we are looking at book number 21, which is Jingo, published in 1997. So, Kathy, what's the synopsis for Jingo?
An island rises from the sea, midway between Ankh-Morpork and Clatch, and suddenly the city streets are full of racism and patriotic bravado. Commander Vimes just wants to keep the peace, but when civic leaders are set on war, what can a copper do but walk his beat and chase down suspects? One such chase involves commandeering a boat and sailing for Clatch, which is also preparing for war. In the desert, Vimes learns something about big crimes and little crimes and ends up arresting 2 armies. Meanwhile, Colon and Nobbs are forced to go on a strange journey with the patrician land of Quirm, and Nobby gets in touch with his feminine side on the other side of the sea. This book depicts racism and thinly veiled Islamophobia, which we will discuss. We are not people who experience these prejudices ourselves, so we're trying to keep an awareness of our own ignorance.
Okay, so with that, what's your initial thoughts?
This is one of the watch books I reread quite a bit when I was younger, and so I quite liked it. But again, I think I'd forgotten the structure of it. It's a little bit of an odd structure, I think, for a watch book. It's less kind of murder mystery focused. But I enjoyed it, while also, as I think we've mentioned before with some of these, it feeling far too relevant.
Yeah, this one especially on the nose for
yes,
current.
for just now, which we'll get to. It was good, but yeah, just I think it felt a bit different. I mean, this is the first watch book which doesn't kind of have the whole King conspiracy. It's doing something a bit different. It's also occurred to me that I would have read this initially in the early noughties, but it was written, as you said, in the late 90s.
Yeah, 97.
And therefore being written a bit earlier, but it did very much, I think, depict the Islamophobia of the early noughties.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember exactly when I read which Pratchett book, but I think don't think I'd read any in 99. I think I'd read them all 2000 onwards. Yeah. Again, I can't remember the order of stuff because there's a point where I just buy one every few weeks. And then some of them I'd reread a lot. But I definitely would have read this one after 9/11. And I don't know that I explicitly, as a teen, kind of pulled together those things, but I feel like it probably was an element of being kind of instructive. It occurs to me that it's about being in a diverse city where there are people from different parts of the world, and that's fine and just how it is. And then what happens when that becomes something that people from that same city start having a problem with. And now we live in a diverse city.
Yeah.
And that's happening.
Yeah, I think...
Again, because it keeps happening. But yeah.
I think certainly for me, when I first read this, it would have been 97 when it came out, because I went to see the dramatisation of it at the Unicorn Theatre in Abingdon, and they did those very quickly after they came out, especially Jingo. So I went to see that with my mother. But at the time, I was living in South Oxfordshire, which is not exactly the most diverse place in the world.
Well, that's the thing. I was reading it in rural Worcestershire.
And I think definitely to go through the reread, it has definitely a lot more of a, I think there's a lot more that's hit home now. I've lived and worked in a very multicultural city. Yeah. I've worked in, while I haven't worked in some of the very multicultural areas of the city, it is all over, and I see a lot of, different, all different ethnicities as part of my job. Yeah, and it's very different now to when I was living in Oxfordshire, where it was just well, if you saw a different, not a white person, that was cause for. I think there was in my primary school there was one non-white child. Secondary school wasn't that much better proportion-wise either.
Yeah, thinking about it, I think there were about 3 families in our village. I've only, before coming to university, and actually for a chunk of university, probably because of the subject I was doing, I only had like one teacher in education who wasn't white. And yeah, similar. I mean, I wonder if reading this was maybe without us fully realizing, maybe vaguely instructive to us as like white rural English
hopefully,
children.
So I'm hoping that this book helped me form some better views on the world.
The bit that I specifically remember, which, should we just get into it a bit?
Yep.
The bit I specifically remember is when Vimes is thinking, you'd see somebody walking down the street and be like, oh, dates and camels, which is kind of like, they're very clutched and stuff. And then they'd speak and they'd have a Morporkian accent you could float rocks on. It's basically the thing of like, some people are British Asian and they're from here.
Yes.
That, as you say, we've come from, these very white backgrounds, now living somewhere more diverse. And we did say that we think, in a previous book, Pratchett explicitly said, oh, there's no racism in Discworld because there's just speciesism instead. And I think this is Pratchett being a bit like, no, I can't really have that.
No, I think
I can't just be a bit like, oh, it's just humans against like dwarves and trolls.
I think for his,
it's a development.
I think his I initially thought, oh, it would be nice to, and I think he most likely looked at the world and went, no, sorry, I can't just let this go.
I want to talk about
I need to say this, and to do it with just like, obviously we will get the dwarves and the trolls stuff later, but I think
there's been a little bit of that so far as well.
But even just trying to use them as stand-in analogues might not make the point he was wanting to make. People might miss it.
The book is cool, Jingo.
Yeah, so I think he's gone, no, actually, there is racism. There always is racism, unfortunately.
That's how humans are.
Yeah, and I'm going to
talk about that.
I'm going to do my best to poke at this.
It's basically anti-racism, anti-war, which I think is where we have both ended up as people through different routes getting there. So as we said, it's got a bit of a weird structure in that the other Watch books very much there's a murder mystery and it's probably part of something a bit bigger, and that's usually some sort of royal conspiracy, but we're past that now. But this still has a conspiracy thing, but it kind of ends up being a bit like, oh, it's an international, like it's a murder mystery, and there's clearly somebody trying to stitch up a minority group or sort of place the blame on people. So, and then it becomes a conspiracy, and then it becomes like an international chase, and then it becomes a bit of a different thing.
Yeah, I say so. The first half is this kind of
it's all like Ankh-Morpork.
Yeah, all my Ankh-Morpork. You've got them investigating this attempted assassination of a prince from Clatch,
but not by the assassins, which would be fine.
Yeah, exactly. If the assassins were doing it, not a problem. But no, it was another
guild business.
No, and you've got Vimes, in amongst that, but with Colon and Nobbs doing the official look at it, while Anger and Carrot are doing the unofficial look at it. So you're getting both sides of this. People are looking at it. You've obviously got this very staged set of murders. They find the assassin murdered in a very staged way. Literally sand on the floor.
Not an assassin, he's a contract killer.
Yes, contract killer. I'm sorry. Assassin with a small A, not a big A. But the point is the stupid watch to find, and then you've
yes, here are the clues.
Yes,
we'll see.
Yeah, and so so you've got this going on where they're kind of working out what's going on, but also it's getting more complicated. It's all in the city, and then
they're also having to keep the peace as tensions.
Yeah, and tensions are rising. The local curry shop is attacked. Yeah, and
fire.
Yes,
which is too relevant.
So you've got this bit, and then about halfway through, everyone jumps on a boat and goes to Clatch, and it's
a little over halfway through, I think. Actually,
yeah,
it's not how long the building was.
And it suddenly turns into this, they're going through the desert. You're seeing a bit of a seeing, because this is the first time we really get to see Clatch as you heard about it, but it's the first time you get.
It was in Sorcery. Did you go there in Sorcery?
True, yes, did you go in Sorcery? But you get a bit more of the, you see a bit more of the, and yes, it's kind of it moves on to something else that isn't quite.
Well, people keep saying politics.
Yes.
And it moves on to that.
Yes, I suppose it is
but
more
actual politics and not just Colon going politics and nodding and putting a finger on his nose.
Yes.
So The structure's a bit interesting. It also struck me that, I mean, this is the first one where I think we get Vimes out of Ankh-Morpork.
Yes.
So first he's on the sea, which he doesn't know nothing about.
Yeah.
And then he's in the desert, you don't know nothing about that. So this, in fact, is the first, I think, of a variety of books where it's like Vimes has to leave Ankh-Morpork and then doesn't know what to do.
Yes.
Because he's very much a creature of a very specific ecosystem.
Yeah.
And he does not thrive outside of that ecosystem.
This might be why he has to arrest the two armies at the end. He's just like, I know, that's what I know. I can arrest people. I'm arresting everyone.
Well,
we'll get to that. We'll get to it.
Occurs to me that you've got Ankh-Morpork, which is obviously a city, so it's very condensed and contained.
Yeah.
It's not clear how far into the hinterland is Ankh-Morpork. It's never really gone into, and there's the whole sort of thing of like that part of the continent is maybe also all kind of Britain and Europe, but yeah. Anyway. But then Clatch is obviously this massive country. Pratchett sort of introduces, kind of manages to get some Roman history into Ankh-Morpork, in that you've got General Tacitus, who's clearly a mixture of... Well, the name's kind of from Tacitus, who was actually a Roman writer, but was the, I think, son-in-law of a general who wrote about a lot. It sounds a bit like Tacticus. Obviously sounds like Tacitus. It's also kind of Julius Caesar-ish, and there's sort of this idea that at some point Ankh-Morpork did invade parts of Clatch, and then you've got, the things with the statues in the desert and the whole kind of that whole Ozymandias, Alexander the Great type quote from whichever poet is that I forget now. Anyway, so there's sort of like supposed to be a bit of history of that in there. So I think they kind of wanted to make sure Ankh-Morpork had an empire from before, because how else do you display very much British jingoism without people harking back to an empire of some kind?
Yep.
It is somehow still a whole thing. But yeah, so this starts because there's Leshp, which is an island that bubbles up from the sea in the midpoint between the two. And what you get, and what struck me very early on, was that happens, and then you're in Ankh-Morpork and you're seeing things through Vimes' point of view, and all the people at what is clearly the Ankh-Morpork version of Speaker's Corner, rather than saying all the different random things they say, it's like they're all talking about Clatch. And it's like, suddenly the problem was Clatch. Yeah. And that feels very familiar here and now, when you have the thing where suddenly the media and then the government, and it's never always sure who started this, suddenly decides that a certain group is the problem and they get othered.
Yeah.
Oh, suddenly the problem is this.
People arriving on small boats.
People just being trans.
I think the small boats one is definitely... I mean, yes, obviously trans stuff is definitely a
big I'm just saying there's various things where, like, this wasn't particularly a problem for anyone before, but suddenly the media are talking about, yes, the small boats things, although that... Migrants in some form tend to roll around pretty regularly. Yeah. But yeah, suddenly that is all the things. So that felt like a lot. Just talking about... I think if we talk about the jingoism and then go on to the racism as a progression...
Yeah...
So, jingoism, that's very much based on World War I stuff.
Yeah.
And it's actually interesting, this was a book that was mentioned as being like a text that could be read as part of my A-level English literature, because there's a whole lot of stuff about war poetry, and so we read a lot of war poetry. Like, we even got to go to Belgium and go around some war graves and read poems there.
Oh,
as an excuse to get on the coach and have a bit of a trip to Belgium and bits of France. I mean, so there's a lot of stuff about... I mean, you do World War One a lot, because you do it in history, you do it in English. But you are also, for English literature at A-level, encouraged to read more widely, and they suggested various other things to look at, one of which I remember being the fourth series of Blackadder, and one of them was specifically Jingo.
Yeah.
And I was like, these are both things I already have and like to read, so fine. Jingoism is kind of based on this very sort of, it'll be over by Christmas sort of attitude to war. The idea that, we're superior, we're great. It's this patriotic bravado that isn't really based on the reality of a place, but just kind of, I mean, perhaps not as much then, but now feeds into a lot of nostalgia.
Yeah.
For a time that probably wasn't actually as good as the people now are saying.
Oh, God, no. Very much no.
And, I mean, it's not called jingoism anymore, because that was very specific to this World War One sort of like... I guess we call boosterism now, but like pro-war boosterism. And you see the street level version of it, the city preparing for war and everyone wanting war will go be Johnny Clatchian. But you also see across classes, because you have the kind of buffoonish lords, idealised by Lord Rust, which is the whole lions led by donkeys kind of thing.
It's just, I mean, it is... Throughout history has happened, but it's, very, this kind of, we are the upper class, therefore we are bred to lead. We don't need to know anything actually about leading an army. It will just naturally occur to us, and we shall raise our banners, and the common man flocks to us, and we shall go off, and we shall.
Sadly, the common man did seem to do that quite a bit.
The common man did.
I think the point is it shows this is across classes, but it sort of displays differently in different groups.
Yeah, I mean, but the idea.
Also the idea that the enemy is so cowardly they will run away at the first taste of cold steel, whilst also being very cunning and warriors and dangerous.
It's the dark after you can't be seen to be going and stomping on pure cowards or people who can't fight. But also, you don't want them to make it sound like it's going to be too much of a battle.
It will be over by Hogswash.
Yeah, but I mean, let's be honest. The Calachian Empire is a load of clans that are always fighting each other.
Well, this is the thing. You've got Ankh-Morpork as this sort of small area that is a very diverse population, but very contained, and therefore almost rubbing up against each other. Just because I think, in terms of geography, it is a city-state. It's one large, but still contained city where all these people are quite close together. Clatch, however, is obviously a massive area and that's loosely affiliated. So you've kind of got that thing where there are lots of different groups who also all don't like each other very much. And same as the different groups in the city. But they're geographically much more spread out.
But the point is, they're always fighting. They've got standing warriors. They've got, whereas
they have standing army.
Whereas the Ankh-Morpork doesn't have a standing army. It's just raising the banners and hoping, raise the banners, open the armory, hope what you've got in there isn't too rusted to actually do the job. Then this kind of overconfidence belief with Jingo's in your own superiority. That yes, the clans, the people in the clans, they're so cowardly. As soon as you wave your sword at them, that as soon as they see our troops ranked up, they're gonna go running for the hills. But yet, actually, we've got to make sure that they are honourable enough that it doesn't feel like we're kicking.
I don't know that people are too bothered about that. If I'm honest,
I think from a
balance, though.
Yeah, it's a balance because if you can sit there and go, actually they're a bunch of useless warriors. It's like, well, what's the?
There's also the idea of using a war to bring internal groups together against an external enemy, which again is very much what a lot of the rhetoric we had, othering a group.
Which is what what's the whole conspiracy for Clatch was doing.
That's what I was going to say. That's not actually quite what's happening in Ankh-Morpork. That's what Clatch is doing, as it turns out. But we have to find out more about the conspiracy before we have that. And Vimes is seeing all this as the commander of the Watch, and is like, well, I want to keep the peace, and this doesn't seem peaceful. And he starts off by like a few people going back to Clatch, and he starts heckling them specifically, but then heckling individual ranty people does not actually. No. Bring peace about.
I mean, that's just the book equivalent of shouting at the internet on internet comments, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, I guess was around, but less of a thing in late 90s. Another thing that's taken from World War One is the ladies giving out the white feathers, people aren't enlisting, so the whole conscientious objector thing, which I think I don't know if that was in both World Wars, maybe. I know there was some stuff about conscientious objectors in World War Two as well.
I think it has been was in both.
So I feel like some of the stuff gets a bit mixed together. Like I know roughly the shape of each war, but like some of it gets a bit, attitude gets a bit mixed together in your head, doesn't it?
Whether they were both active in both wars, I can't remember now.
I know I'm certainly aware of a family story of someone who was doing stuff secretly to help the war, but it was top secret, and so didn't look to be in active combat and was therefore kind of shunned. Not that I'm giving a lot of detail about that now that I think about it, but yeah.
I think it's one of those where sort of World War One, if you were back at home, you weren't obviously fighting because that was all happening in France. Whereas in World War Two, there was a lot more home front stuff.
But the thing I'm talking about was in World War Two.
But there's a lot more home front stuff. So I think possibly the feathers was World War One, and then it's still, and there was. I'm sure it still happened in World War Two, but it was like there was more stuff being done from England. Anyway, we're not military historians, so moving on.
Jingoism and this kind of version of patriotism, but it's a version of patriotism that only seems to allow belonging if you exclude people. And it's interesting that quite often people of this sort of mindset don't really like Britain. I mean, okay, we all have some problems with Britain. If you live in Britain, you have some sort of problem with it. There's a lot of issues. But a lot of people are a bit like, oh, it was better before, so it captures nostalgia, either from times people actually remember. And, I mean, things always seem better when you were younger.
Yeah.
Well, not always, but for the most part. But also, or talking back to something that current people didn't experience, but kind of heard about it from, grandparents or something. But then a lot of things about how Britain actually is now, it's not that people are like, oh, there are problems that solve them. It's like just harking back and it's like, let's just exclude other people because that will solve the problem, and it won't.
No.
I guess going on more specifically to the race stuff, because I feel like in this, again, there are dwarf and troll characters in it as part of the Watch. And again, we see that broader Watch. But the othering of Clatch all seems to be human. I mean, it specifically says trolls can't handle the heat in Clatch, and Detritus ends up in a very bad way because it's so hot there. And
I think possibly...
There's unclear how, there's no equator, but anyway.
Possibly dwarves is, not a good mining country.
It's a desert, I suppose, that's not... So they're obviously very much of that continent. But I think it does show, as we said before, kind of Pratchett's development as a writer, in that he said, no, I do need to talk about this. And there's a bit where a Clatchian dignitary comes up to Vimes and says, can you explain this phrase to me that somebody shouted at us in the street? And Vimes is like, it refers to your headwear. And he's like, oh, how interesting. It's like, it was an insult. And it's clear that everyone else that this guy has asked this question of has just been a bit like, it's just, I don't know, what? Even though the guy clearly knows what he's doing. So that's when you sort of see that it's not the main prince, it's like the king's brother or something, that he's clearly quite on the ball and perhaps a bit canny.
Which is why they try and kill him.
Yes. It comes out some years before post 9/11 stuff, but it's very much that sort of like Asian people more generally, but specifically, Islamic. It doesn't actually go into religion particularly in this at all, because the whole point is both countries are polytheists. But there is one bit where comes something like, their priests are all mad, and they're not like our priests. Yeah. And Nobby's like, our priests aren't great. Because the whole point is all the religions seem to have some form of sacrifice, and I think other than the books where Pratchett specifically talks about religion, that's not the thing he's talking about.
No. There's always been... It was back in the day. The Irish were the group that were being, and
But it's harder to immediately identify somebody's Irish.
I mean, that's the thing,
which is kind of
But and then obviously the black people who that was. Despite the fact that we asked them to come over to give us a hand, and then we were dicks to them, and are still being dicks to them. So
Vimes is actually thinking about stuff, and he almost doesn't quite figure out what's happening. He doesn't like the people on his side. He doesn't like the rich buffoons like Lord Rust. And he knows there's a conspiracy, but he's keen to think, it must be the awful people that I know. And somebody actually says to him later on the books, like, no, you have to be fair and concede that other people, people from Clatch can also be sneaky and manipulative and doing things for bad reasons. So he's almost doing that thing where he's overcorrecting, being a bit like, these people are the ones being victimised. So... this curry place that they go to, all the Watchmen go to, all the time, people go to, somebody basically tries to firebomb it, and the family are taken into custody, but for protection, and the Watchmen looking after the shop. But then a lot of Clatchians and Ankh-Morpork come around and say, why are you holding them in prison? It's like, we've not imprisoned them, we just took them somewhere safe. It's just that where we have that safe... It's a police station. Yes. And then they get... But then what happens is people in that community start arguing with each other. And then you've got the thing of shop owner's son, who's clearly been born in Ankh-Morpork. He's from there. And that's the thing that the point Vimes makes, you can look at... I mean, you have it now, there's people talking about deporting. Somebody said something recently about deporting an MP, and it's like, she's from here. She's just brown. Ugh. It's, he then apologised, but, I don't think he's going to get fired from his job, so. No. So I think it was, a journalist or something. Anyway, there's a lot of this horrible stuff. And then later that family and a lot of other people are actually going to Clatch, specifically. There's kind of a bit of a, no one's been officially told to leave the city, but people are like, it's not great here, we're going back. And then the son's like, I've never been to Clatch, I don't know it, I'm from here. Curl and Nobbs do that thing where they sit and have a chat about things. Yeah. Well, not stand, but they're kind of loitering somewhere, having a chat.
No, they're guarding something.
Well, at first they're watching that guy who's mispainting the boat.
Yes.
They watch a guy painting the name on a ship, and it's supposed to say Pride of Ankh-Morpork, but he's missed out the E. And then later it gets called back and goes the Pride of Ankh-Morpork. And they're sort of talking about, and at first it's kind of cultural, but then Colon starts sort of saying, he's obviously a bit reluctant to say it, a bit like, well, the fact is, like, well, they're just not white. But Nobby's the one who kind of realises, because sometimes Nobby just goes along with what Colon says, but I think Nobby's a bit like, well, what colour am I? Because the whole thing with Nobby is that he's
a colour.
Undescribable.
Yes.
But basically dwarf-sized human, but clearly with a range of skin tones. And again, this is the problem with adapting this. You can't really cast knobs.
No.
Like, that's not, a person like that doesn't exist. Again, I tend to think grey, but I think it's just because of the illustrations. But yes, so Nobby kind of sneakily and subtly kind of like pokes at Colon, but in a way that Colon doesn't quite notice. But the fact is, you have a character who's one of the viewpoint characters, one of the characters who's sitting here from the start of the series, just basically being very casually racist. And you're a bit like...
I think this is the thing, but
I mean, obviously, you know, we're in a position of privilege, we don't have to do this sort of thing, but there are sometimes times when I interact with people, and later I thought to myself, are they just being pleasant to me because I'm also white? You know, it's a bit like... Yeah. I haven't yet had somebody just assume that because I'm white they can say racism to me, but I think it's always one of those things you're a bit like...
I've got a few other stories that... Yeah. You know.
You do sort of need to have awareness of being a bit like, no, I'm sorry, that's not right, but it can be hard to in the moment if you're not expecting it. But I think it's just one of those things that if we're in a position of privilege to be able to push back in some way, thing where... And I've heard... In the past, people sort of say something about somebody being casually racist, and it's like, actually, that's still just racism, though. Like,
yes.
They're not maybe actively doing much about it, but it's there and it's contributing to the whole.
But I think, you know, the more you push back on the casual stuff, the easier it is to you know, then the bigger stuff is more obvious.
And maybe it makes people think about what they're saying. If they honestly weren't meaning it that way, and you're a bit like, that's actually very terrible, don't.
Yeah.
Colon doesn't explicitly get comeuppance from that in the moment, because Nobby's mostly just kind of needling him a bit by pointing out some of the logical inconsistencies in what he's saying. But then later on, Colon does have to go to Clatch, and he ends up being told to pretend to be Clatchian, and then he behaves in this way, and all these people are a bit like, who's this idiot from Ankh-Morpork? So I was like, no, he's clearly a spy, because Ankh-Morpork people aren't this stupid and stereotypical. So it's like, are you sure they might be? And it's like, I don't know. And then he says he's from another part of Clatch he's been told is specifically like a byword for idiots. And they're like, oh, okay, it's that. Which again shows that in Clatch, it's like, well, we've got prejudices against the people in the other areas as well. But I think it does have Colin at least see something that's outside of his experience, because again, he spent most of his time, I think, in Ankh-Morpork or in the bits around Ankh-Morpork when he was in the regiments, which I think are roughly some form of Western Europe.
Yeah, I think it's having Colin being like this it's a good representation of what we have. Is the nice guy, you know, well,
it's old Fred.
Yeah, and enjoy having a pint down the pub with him, but still has these underlying views.
It's kind of thing where if you're complaining about people, you know, you might be a bit like, oh, so-and-so so fussy, or so-and-so so this or that. Yeah. But when you make it about a group of people...
Yeah, it's really
horrible. And also, that guy's not going to presumably commit any violence. But would he turn a blind eye if somebody was doing something like that? Would he vote for a person who wanted to deport them? Probably.
You know, anyway, shall we move on to what's next on your notes?
Some of the stuff about Vimes and the conspiracy, and then also the character of 71 Hour Ahmed.
Yeah.
So I think we've touched on this a little bit. You know, Vimes is trying not to be prejudiced, and he can see what is very obviously a staged crime scene implicating a Clatchian. You know, to the point of
I think this. You know, so the whole assassination happens. There's this big parade that Vimes has to lead. I mean, it's quite funny.
Which he does not like.
Yeah, so once again, Vimes being pushed into a position because
a ceremonial role,
which although comes back to be useful to him later. So this big parade that happens every year.
They're giving an honorary doctorate at the university, which, and I actually understood the Cod Latin this time, and that they're giving a Clatchian prince a doctorate, a sweet FA.
Yeah, and someone attempts to assassinate him, shooting with a crossbow.
From a window in a building.
Yeah, and this obviously sets off this whole investigation, and you have 71 Hour Ahmed is the...
It's like the attaché.
Yes, to the prince has come over, and you get this feeling that Vimes kind of gets this feeling, I know this shape of person, but I can't put my finger on what.
He's got this very scarred face, he's got this very massive sword, he seems very, like, stereotypically Clatchian.
Yeah.
at first, but then later when Vimes encounters him, the accent's gone, and he's clearly incredibly shrewd. Vimes kind of realises early on he must be involved in something, but is still thinking, but somebody in Ankh-Morpork has set this up as a pretext for war with Clatch. But there's stuff like, Angua tries to tail him, and he goes through this, and because he chews cloves, and he goes through the spice market, and then she can't catch him again. And there's also, and then later it's very clear he knows there's werewolf in the watch, and he's understood how to deal with that.
Yes.
Yeah, when the ship's taking a lot of people away from Ankh-Morpork to Clatch, he ends up going on there with an unidentified person who seems to be unwell. Angua says she's going to follow because there's various dogs going on the boat as well, so she does her wolf thing, but then he realises what she is and actually puts a silver collar on her. So taking down the Watch's main secret weapon, so you're like, well, this guy clearly understands what's happening and what's going on.
Vimes is being very much pressed on to solve the crime, to solve who, because obviously it doesn't look good politically, and so obviously he puts his best men on it, so that will be Nobbs and Colon, because they need to...
They're good at spotting clues.
Yeah, because in some respects, he knows what needs to happen as far as the official line is, and then he has both Carrot and Angua do the unofficial, which
Carrot's very uncomfortable with because he's no good at undercover.
Yes.
Even though he kind of realises, well, I guess werewolves undercover all the time, or in plain clothes all the time. Angua's like, yes. Their relationship, which I didn't really have trouble with when I was younger, I keep reading and being like, it's really only okay, isn't it? Anyway.
I think we'll get more to that in Carpe Juglium a bit more.
Do you mean the fifth elephant?
Fifth elephant, yes. Carpe Juglium being the witch's one.
That's the vampire one, and then fifth elephant is the werewolf one.
Yeah, okay, look, I got,
It's all some sort of uber-vold.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway.
There's also a fire at the Clatchin embassy. Like, somebody sets the embassy at a light, and everyone's just watching, and Vimes is like, no, form bucket chain, come on, there's a fire. And then people just aren't moving. It's like, well, it's their soil, we're not allowed on it. And the Clatchin guards actually try and stop people from going in, but Vimes realises somebody's in danger in there. Somebody unknown helps him to rescue a person, and he's on a burning roof, and he saves a lady who was sort of in there, and then later we discovered that was all a distraction. But the person Ahmed set the fire, but didn't realise there was a person in there because he was just trying to A, burn some documents, and B, get out the prince because the prince was in danger. It's like, why would the prince be in so much danger? Vimes is told to do what he's told because the patrician disappears, and then Lord Rush is taken over in a sort of wartime emergency. And
it kind of it's not a core deposit. He uses the law to take over because it's a state of war.
He's saying it's emergency, and veterinary doesn't have any military experience.
So veterinary does disappear, but not at that point. He uses the law to take over.
But what happens is that veterinary gives a note to Vimes, which is just a plain bit of paper in an envelope that says Sir Samuel Vimes, Knight.
Yes. And
Vimes is like, why are you reminding me of this? Because he hates the fact he's being ennobled. And then later he realises, wait, if I'm a knight, I'm allowed to, and in fact expected to, create a regiment, because the Rust is telling the Watch to stop doing things. He's like, well, this is my regiment. All the Watchmen have joined.
Well, that's after they all resign, because Rust is basically telling them
Rust wants them to arrest all the Clatchins.
So
Rust basically wants them to treat the Clatchins the way that the US treated the Japanese.
Yeah. So basically, all the senior, everyone just resigns out of the Watch,
and then they join Vimes' regiment, and then they get on a boat. They don't know about the sea.
It's mentioned in the Vimes notices it that basically there's no humans except Carrot, but he's
culturally advanced.
All the ones that end up on the you don't have.
We don't actually, other than Colon Nobbs.
There's no actual humans in that.
I think the point is the human Watchmen, who presumably exist somewhere, are joining up as well. But yes, the ones who end up on the boat is the characters we're already know. No, Constable Visit is there, and he is human.
Yes, okay, yes.
Red Shoe is also human but undead.
Okay, the point is you've got a loss of it's not just anyway.
Because what happens is Angua's on this boat going to Clatch, so they need to follow her. So they sort of set up this rescue mission, and also they realise that Ahmed's there and they're tracking him because he's clearly involved. And so Vimes just same thing that happens in the parade, because when he's reading the parade, Vimes is just walking along on a copper's beat, so everyone's then following him, and then he sees somebody he chases.
Yeah.
And this is where you get a lot of, like, Veterinary's Terrier, like, this idea that he just chases stuff. And again, this is him going, I'm not sure what's happening now. There's a suspect, there's a crime, I'm going to chase.
This is what
and I'll worry about it later.
Yeah.
Like when a dog chases a car, it's like, what are you going to do when you catch it?
Well, in Vimes' case, arrest them, but you know.
That's true, he's got more plan than an actual dog would have. So they end up in the desert. They end up with this tribe of people called is it the Dregs or Dregs? Which is the group that Ahmed belongs to, is supposed to be a particularly nomadic and independent and incredibly violent tribe. But they're clearly following Ahmed's orders. And there's this whole bit in the desert where, again, Vimes, I mean, he's tied up and unconscious part of the time, but he's a bit like, what's happening? And he sort of like realises there's various things they're doing which are kind of like, can we trick the foreigner? There's various things they're doing that's like, this is just how we live because it's the desert, it's different. And then Vimes finally says, no, I'm going to go see Ahmed, and because that Angua does escape. So that they're reunited with her, and then Carrot does his thing of like suddenly he knows everyone and they're all mates.
Knows everyone. He's doing a Paul Atreides. He's wearing the native.
Well, it's Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. He's wearing the native dress correctly. He rides a camel like a native. He's doing all of the. Yes,
it's interesting actually because there's a bit about the conspiracy stuff where back in Ankh-Morpork when Vimes realises there's more to the crime than obviously the oh look, it's the Clatchin, haha, like here are the obvious clues front, and there's even more to it than what seems to be underneath it. Or maybe the people who did that are the same people who attacked the courier place, the same people who set fire to the embassy. And he's like, and then he realised why he was thinking this way, and it's quite a good quote, because he wanted there to be conspirators. It was much better to imagine men in smoky rooms, someone made mad and cynical by privilege and power, plotting over the brandy. He had to cling to this sort of image. Because if you didn't, you might have to face the fact that bad things happen because ordinary people, the kind who brushed the dog and told their children bedtime stories, were capable of then going out and doing horrible things to other ordinary people. And it was so much easier to blame on them. It was bleakly depressing to think that they were us. If it was them, then nothing was anyone's fault. If it was us, what did that make me? After all, I'm one of us. I must be. I certainly never thought of myself as one of them. No one ever thinks themselves as one of them. We're always one of us. It's them that do the bad things.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, again, it's one of those quotes I think it's not quite as big as the Beats Fairy, but gets used quite a bit, and it's so integral to the book in different ways. The idea that actually a lot of the time the people doing the bad stuff were the ordinary people in Ankh-Morpork.
Yeah, I mean the people.
But then there was also a conspiracy, but it was a different group of rich people doing it.
And you've got the conspiracy that's kind of dealing with the politics side of things, but the actual on the ground.
The low level nastiness in the streets.
That's just people seeing things and going, you know what, I think we can get away with this.
And that's the problem we have now. Normalising the idea that it's fine to say stuff to be, it's fine to just say something racist to somebody. It's fine to, and then you got people again trying to set fire to people.
Yeah.
And then somebody pled guilty to, telling people to set fire to somebody, and people are like, oh, she's being unfair. It's like, no, she said that people should be burned to death.
Yes.
That is an incitement to a crime. And that's why she has a criminal record now. But, it's just all this nasty stuff. So it's kind of interesting that there is kind of a conspiracy, but the conspiracy isn't all of it. The conspiracy is the thing doing the high-level stuff, but it bleeds down.
Yeah.
Because, basically what happens is when Vimes finally meets Ahmed, he suddenly realises why Ahmed felt so familiar. Everyone felt on edge around him, and he always seemed to kind of know what was happening and be keeping an eye on everything. And Vimes like, oh, he's also a policeman.
Yep. He's the Clatchin version of Vimes.
But you see, in his case, the issue is he's protecting the one prince, but he knows that the crime is being done by the other prince, who's basically tried to basically create a pretext for war with Ankh-Morpork. And so then you get this interesting thing where Vimes thinking about big crimes and little crimes, because Ahmed's there a bit like, I can't do anything because he's my prince. There's nothing I can do. I just keep peace in the desert in this wide area, but this is too big a crime for me to deal with. And Vimes is thinking about big crimes and little crimes. He's thinking, you can arrest a criminal on the street, you can deal with like a murder, but how do you deal with whole countries trying to murder each other? And he's thinking that there should be some sort of big court that deals with countrywide crimes. I'm like, is Vimes talking about the International Criminal Court? I mean, I think they don't have that.
No.
I mean, we have it and there's issues. But at least I guess we have.
I mean,
that.
we have at least the nominal idea of it, yes.
We have the intention of that,
yeah.
Ineffective though it may be at times. Again, there's another quote here. It's like a mere murderer, well, you had a whole range of options. He could deal with a mere murderer. You had criminals and you had policemen, and there was a sort of seesaw there which balanced out in some strange way. But if you took a man who'd sit down and decide to start a war, what in the name of seven hells could you balance him with? You'd need a policeman the size of a country. So, yeah, and he says you couldn't blame the soldiers, they're just joined up to be pointed in the right direction. So, yes.
And I think this is why you end up with him arresting two armies, is because that's all he can see to do is...
Well, he manages to get into the kind of where the two high commands are meeting and kind of like stall them with enough information as to what's happening to make everyone go, wait a second, and then,
And then arrests two armies, which is, gutsy. And then they do the World War One football in the no man's land bit.
Because it's already been established that Carrot takes sort of to play football with him everywhere. Or because at the start he's getting two youth gangs to kind of like play nicely together because it's Carrot, which does lead to Vimes and Anger at one point sitting together and being like, but how does this work? Like, people just follow him. Why isn't it? They both have different theories about it. And even Vimes like, but you're his girlfriend. And Anger's like, well, that's different. But I also am like, what is this? Yes, apparently that legendary king power doesn't just work in Ankh-Morpork.
No, it's pretty much everywhere. Well, because he is Prince Charming, so, that's it, really.
I don't feel like any of the stories with Prince Charming feature anything like this. It's just rescuing a lady from somewhere.
I think this is just, expanding out the power set. So.
Yes.
Do we want to touch on some of the more,
light-hearted aspects?
Yes, so we have...
Yes.
I think we've got...
there's the submarine trip.
There is Colon and Nobbs and going on a trip with the patrician and Leonard Quirm, which, is...
It's a good opportunity to show Leonard Quirm because the first time they encounter him, he's been told to make them go with him forcibly and points a weapon at them, goes, no, wait, I have to resign it, hands them bits of weapon, redesigns it on the fly, and they're like, what's even happening? And then, and then they show the submarine he invented. And then it's interesting that they're using the submarine to attach onto a ship to tow them towards Clatch. That I was like, oh, this really of sinking ships. And he's like, what? Sink ships with sailors on? No one would think of such a thing.
Yes.
And it's this weird thing that Leonard of Quirm has where he'll draw these beautiful things, come up with these great ideas, and every so often there'll be something that could be used to very deadly effect there, but he just hasn't realised it himself.
Because he's not... That's
that way inclined.
Yeah, so it's all of these.
Very naive in certain ways, which is why he's locked in the palace.
Yes,
but it seems like he's locked himself in there.
Yeah, he's quite likes it. I think he quite likes it. Yes,
because he just returns.
Yeah, and he's designed all the traps that stop people getting to him. I think it's I think Leonard of Quirm is this quite an interesting. You get to see more of him in this one than.
Yes.
And just
it also mentions that he's been missing for 5 years because he's been mentioned vaguely before. He's like mentioning Weird Sisters and I think maybe Moving Pictures as well, as sort of used to be in the Alchemist's Guild.
Yeah, so and just this idea of this absolute genius who he's
built a submarine.
Submarine. He's looking at how to make things fly. He's got all the classic Da Vinci tropes.
I think including being very pleasant.
Yeah, but he just can't see the things that some of the things he's doodled as the horrific death machines. As the death machines, it's going to be this is a theoretical concept that he's just
no one would actually do this.
Yes. But no, someone would. That's why you're in here.
It's also quite fun that you've got Cullen and Nobbs in a confined space with a guy that they think is absolutely mad and the patrician. And so that Colon at least is absolutely terrified this entire time.
Yeah.
But also is still Colon. So sometimes the patrician will talk to him and you've got that thing that Pratchett quite often does with the wizards, but it's kind of with them in that Colon will be talking at some sort of angle and the patrician's like, how interesting. And the patrician's clearly... So Colin thinks it's going quite well, and the patrician's just like, what? and then they end up in Clatch, and the patrician's trying to look around, and they ends up making them... Pratchett uses a lot of comedy tropes to interesting effects. So you've got the thing where they have to go get disguises, so they wait for some people who are about the same size as them to walk past, pull them into an alleyway and steal their clothes, except that goes the wrong way around, and then Colin and Nobbs end up with their clothes being stolen. I mean, I don't even feel like that's the thing that happens. It's just, I think it's just Pratchett being like, look, these comedy tropes are very silly. And then the patrician manages to get them some stuff, and they pretend to be entertainers, and the patrician starts juggling.
Yeah.
And just, I never practiced it before, he just can do it, because he's, again, kind of like Carrot in a different way, but like almost supernaturally good at certain things in a way that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
When they get steal the donkey and supplies from this entertainment troupe, is that Nobby ends up having to dress as a lady.
Yes, Nobby does get the classic dancing lady outfit, because obviously they've stolen the camel and clothes from a troupe of a 3-man band.
No, it was a donkey.
Donkey, sorry, yes.
It's Vimes who they have the
Vimes has got the camel, yes.
Yeah.
They've got the donkey
And they spit
and
a
the
lot.
minaret.
And at first, Nobby's really annoyed about this, but Pratchett, even in the text, has a thing about how, there is a comedy trope where any unattractive man who dresses as a lady will somehow become incredibly attractive to other men. Again, going with the tropes in a lot of, like, old films and things like that. It's like, this trope was struggling greatly against the reality that was Corporal Nobbs. But what happens is, because Nobby seems to be a lady, because earlier in the book, he'd been talking to Angela, much to her slight horror, about wants a bit more companionship, about romance, and she'd been a bit like, women usually like men that can make them laugh, because she's not sure what else to say.
Which is fair.
It's always a bit awkward when someone's like, you're a woman, can I ask you a question? And I'm like, why would that be relevant to what's about to be discussed? Because I have had that, and it's like, okay, but I'm not the woman you're talking about, so she's a different person.
Yeah.
That's not
But all
how
women have the same things, surely.
Yeah. But yeah, so he's kind of pushed into this. But then what happens is that, Nobby gets very into it. So he ends up being referred to as Betty. And he starts doing this thing where everyone's like, oh no, don't make your lady dance.
Yes.
So they kind of start using that as a bit of a threat.
Yeah, they pay them not to.
But then what happens is at one point when the patrician asks Colon to go ask them to go find some information about what's happening over there, where's the army base and that sort of thing, is that Nobby isn't allowed in the tavern because Betty is a lady, and so he gets sent to talk to ladies. So he ends up basically sitting in with a group of women near a well, and they're all chatting, and they're all lamenting the fact that my husband's gone to war, my fiance's gone to war, what will happen? And you've got the old women who are sort of saying, no, you should support the men in the fighting. And the young women are like, but what happens to us? And they're quite upset. And it's just people, especially can be very supportive and sympathetic of each other. And so it sort of shows Nobby experiencing that in the context, he's never experienced that before. He's not used to being around women that much, I think, anyway. And particularly in the thing where he's being treated as an equal, who's also, able to get support, because prior to this he kind of is suddenly getting a bit like, well, I've only been a woman for a few hours, but I'm already fed up of you men, because he's a bit like, why am I having to do things because I'm the woman? And it's interesting because the narrative voice actually suddenly switches, so that rather than it being like somebody will say she and it's like Nobby looks annoyed, it suddenly switches to the narrative saying Betty and using she her pronouns. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And has Pratchett kind of, presumably accidentally, found a quite good way of using the narrative to show that characters gender fluid? It does get that way a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to when Cheery first, And,
well, yes, but with Cheery it was kind of like, Cheery presented one way, but actually, and then this is more.
I just said similar.
It's a bit more complex and interesting. Yeah. And what happens is that Nobby starts then telling them, I think, kind of dirty jokes.
Yes.
But they're all quite interesting in that the older women are a bit like, so the older women are like, for goodness sake, and leave. But some of the younger women are like, we've never heard about that before. Because it's coming from a woman, they're a bit like, that's interesting information about men. Because I think the assumption in that group is that because Betty is an entertainer, she's probably a bit more loose and worldly than any of them are encouraged to be.
Yeah.
But it's still good to have information, and women do that. They quite often share information. I mean, it's not, maybe not as much as a stereotype say, or again, it's very variable, but that is kind of a thing. And it's just interesting that Nobby then feels so comfortable and welcomed in this group of women. And then Nobby's the one who actually finds out about where the army are going because the women said it. And normally people don't necessarily think of listening to the women.
No,
but
the women have, because
that is where the information
they were lamenting where their men had gone and knew where their men had gone. Whereas the men didn't know where the other men had gone because they didn't really
those men
care.
weren't there. Like, those men were still where they were, so, yeah. Okay, talk about things being light-hearted. The reason why Nobby's name... Because the patrician just says, oh, this is Betty.
Yeah.
And then later, when Colon is told that he has to go find out information, and he's trying to think of Clatch's name, he's like, oh, call me Al.
And there we have a Paul Simon reference.
Which I only got this time of reading. I was like, I did not notice this the previous time, but I probably hadn't listened to that song quite as much when I was younger.
And, it's a little fun little gag there.
Yes. I suppose the other bit, that, although this is actually less lighthearted, is the Trousers of Time bit.
Yeah, I mean, Trousers of Time are a great concept. And again, we have... It's Vimes' wonderful organiser that he got given...
The disorganiser.
Disorganiser that he got given in Feet of Clay.
By Sybil.
And obviously he's having problems using it.
One thing that occurred to me, because what happens is it goes bingly bingly beep.
Yes.
And it annoys him every time. And it suddenly occurred to me here in the year of 2025, the idea of something in your pocket that would just beep at you constantly was an absolute source of irritation and like not how people should be. And I was like, oh God, we were falling apart.
Yes. Yeah.
Because in 97, that would be like a thing a business person would have.
Pages.
Yeah, and but now it's like everything.
Yeah.
So there's that. That's a glimpse of a different time that we lived through.
Yeah. Anyway, so he's got the disorganiser and he's trying. It's trying to be helpful. It wants to do its job, and Vimes is not really caring.
It's kind of like Clippy, isn't it?
It is very much like Clippy. So it manages to sort of look at the potential. It's another kind of physicsy.
He asks it to tell him what appointments he has, not the ones it thinks he has, or the ones he's actually told it. Because like, why are you telling me this? It's like, well, you didn't tell me. It's like, can't you just tell me what appointments I have without me telling you?
Yeah. So it manages to look into this kind of potentious space of appointments.
Yes.
Looks at the probabilities and starts giving Vimes appointments before they happen.
So, like, things before they happen. Oh, because at one point it goes, oh, you having a meeting with the patrician? It's like, no, I don't. And then it's like, Little Bottom comes in and goes, you need to go to the palace the patrician wants you. Yeah. Oh, no, you have a meeting at the Star Chamber, that's it.
Yeah, so
sorry, it's the Rat's Chamber.
Rat's Chamber, yes. So you've got this, so you've now got the disorganiser actually being very useful because it is telling him of appointments that he doesn't even know about in advance.
Yeah.
And so you've got, and then Pratchett does this thing where it's Vimes leaves, comes back, and you've got this moment of...
Vimes makes the decision to leave Ankh-Morpork.
No, there's the switch in... The actual switch of the things happens before then.
Oh, okay.
So this organises...
I thought it was when he made the decision to do that.
Might have been.
Because the whole point is the decision.
Yes, so you've got this... So, yes, yeah, right. Trousers of Time happens, but in both of them, Vimes goes and picks up the disorganiser.
Each version of Vimes picks up the other's disorganiser. So somehow in this weird moment, so it's slightly timely, Vimes picks up the disorganiser of the Vimes who decided to stay in Ankh-Morpork rather than the one who decided, no, we're going to follow. Yeah.
So then throughout the rest of the book, you have the disorganiser going bingly bingly bong, defending the palace. And all of these things where Vimes staying and Clatch invading is an absolute is the worst.
Happened.
It goes through all of these things about setting up defences for the city,
barricades being stormed,
and towards the end you get notifications of all the watch dying.
Like literally, it goes, and it always says it in this weird sort of chirpy 11:02 p.m.
Yeah,
and he's written p.m. and a.m. in like an odd sort of way, so you can kind of tell it's over pronouncing it. But it's like something p.m. Death of Corporal Littlebottom. Something PM, death of Captain Carrot. I think the point of that is it's what pushes Vimes to do something drastic when he's in the desert. At first he thinks it's saying nonsense, and then he realises, no, it's describing me back in Ankh-Morpork and everyone dying. It's like that, you get a brief glimpse of what would happen if you made a different decision, which obviously normally no one ever gets.
No.
And I think it just pushes him to take a bolder action.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the Trials of the Timer is a great idea for this kind of the path not taken.
I was explaining this to our son the other day because he keeps talking about time paradoxes since we showed him Endgame.
And,
he keeps saying paradox for everything. I'm like, that's not quite a paradox.
But yes, this is organizer is nice, and to be fair, it does get to live its life as a organizer for sharks. So
which is
very straightforward. Yeah,
yes.
Swimming, eating.
Yeah.
It's an interesting little Pratchett using temporal stuff and universes stuff. That's
because it also shows the stakes of what could happen.
And how one man's decision sometimes can be that much of a... things pivot on that decision.
Yes. I guess back to stuff that's slightly amusing, maybe, just as a final sort of bit. Some puns I found. So at the end, when Vimes coming up with reasons to arrest the army, he mentions breaching the peace quite early. Yeah. I think, what? It's like, well, it's an army. They're obviously like, this is a war. That's clearly a breach of the peace.
Yes.
But he also comes to other things like loitering with intent. Loitering within tents. Because obviously they're all camped. But there's a few things like at one point, somebody refers to something as the clam before the storm. Mr. Hong and the Free Jolly Luck takeaway is mentioned yet again.
Yes.
I just like that thing. We never hear what that is, we just know a thing happened. There's also the thing with colon, because it's clear that people who have been in the army before, or in the regiments before, have been in these little skirmishes that I think happened within the kind of Stoveplain cities, so like Quirm and Pseudopolis and stuff like that, which sound more like probably kind of raiding type thing. Colon is at one point talking about, and this is a joke I did not get when I was a teenager, how he used to be in a regiment that was referred to as the Pheasant Pluckers. And then he's telling some whole story about how they had like feathers in their hats. And he says, we did make singing marching songs quite tricky. And there's a bit like, are you all right, miss? And Angie was just like, sometimes I just burst out laughing for no reason. And I finally understood that joke. It's the thing when you read it as an adult, you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. Actually, another bit that's interesting. So when Nobby's being Betty and he enters this sort of supportive sorority type environment, there is a footnote about, it mentions Mrs. Palmer, the seamstress guild, and mentions the ladies of the seamstress guild, and goes, and in the footnote it's like, and one gentleman, and it mentions the Blue Cat Club.
Yes.
And it's like, male sex workers exist. Where it sort of says that there was a bit of controversy over that, but they were voted in. Apparently Mrs. Palmer was like, well, unnatural acts are perfectly natural. And I'm like, a reference to people not being straight is there at least. There's also a bit where it says, men disquieted by the sound of many women laughing.
Yes.
And then he puts some footnotes about how often they think the joke's on them, which I think, I'm like, I mean, there are definitely men who do not like to hear the sound of women laughing.
No, because they're concerned that they're laughing, but that's their own.
It just feels hard to be too worried about that. It's that thing, which is said a lot, so I can't remember where it's from, about what's it, a man's greatest fear is that a woman will laugh at him, a woman's greatest fear is that a man will attack her.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not quite even, is it?
No.
But there's also a bit where it says something about how Betty had 1,001 smutty jokes.
Yes.
I was like, because let's face it, in this Clatch is basically Arabia.
Yes.
Particularly. I think Clatch has stood in for a lot of like Middle East, North Africa in general in different Discworld books. This seems very much kind of Arabian specifically.
We're getting minarets. We got,
That's true. Yeah.
Yes.
This is because they do have a flying carpet as well.
Yeah, flying carpet,
which Colon's absolutely afraid of, and just like lies across the whole thing, gripping on. Which is fair. I can kind of understand that. Just some more light-hearted bits, because that's the thing. I mean, we've talked about quite a lot of the weight stuff, but it's still Pratchett. There's still various.
Yeah,
funny
so
bits
I think we'll wrap it up. I think in general we both enjoyed the book. I think this is a very good book to read at the moment for the times we're in.
But I think that's been true at various points since it was written.
But I think especially
will probably continue to be. But yeah,
especially now.
Yes,
if you're gonna sit, unfortunately, I think one of our politicians might need to go back and reread this one if she really
if indeed she did read it in the first place,
because we don't really think she's really got the message.
I think people can read things and not understand them. That
well, happens. I think she was just reading it as a funny book, and I think
and Also, at the time of recording, it is autumn of 2025, and people have gone a little bit insane for the St. George's flag.
Yes.
Which is a whole thing.
But the book as a whole...
It feels, as you say, quite an atmosphere in which this book is needed.
Yes. But I think the thing is with the book is, yes, it's dealing with a lot of weighty issues, but it's doing it in a way that is not smacking you around the face with them, but it's coming at it from a... Actually, more,
like, this is how things happen. Vimes is being like, oh, this is going to cause problem with breaching the peace, but then it starts to feel more personal when a person he knows, although hadn't paid much attention to, is being affected. Colon as the kind of like main example of the casual racist guy is shown to be quite an idiot throughout all of it, although he is just trying to go along and just kind of going with what he's told. So it's not preaching, but it's kind of clear where I think it's clear where the moral is, as you say. A person can be leader of the opposition and miss that entirely, as it turns out, but there we go.
I mean, my only concern is you might need to have read a couple more of the Watch books to try to get the feeling for the characters.
I guess so. Well, I think with all of them,
at this point, I think...
but any practice you go into at this point, or most of them, I think is going to be a bit... there's going to be characters you don't know, but the point is he paints the characters so quickly you kind of have a good idea.
But some of it could be better for him. But
actually, one thing that occurs to me in this is that for Constable Visit, who previously I think we thought was an Omnian, there's a bit where he says, "Oh, I'll consult which god to talk to." So it seems like he's just generally religious, which seemed like a slight change. Yeah,
I think they might have,
and they didn't kind of go into that so much because obviously he's also from a deserty place.
Yes.
So, but I think he's just sort of there to provide a bit of flavour and like what will the Jehovah's Witness do?
I was going to say is the
because I'm sure before he was Omnian.
Definitely, he was Omnian. Yeah,
but in this, somebody's like he says he's going to consult which god to talk to. I'm like, well, that isn't Omnianism monotheism. It's kind of in the name almost.
Yeah, but also in a world where the gods exist.
Gods exist, and polytheism's the default for most people.
Yeah, it might be. I think it might just be a movement in the character. Well, I'm sure he'll. I'm pretty certain he's in later books that we can. But he's always just his background.
Yeah, I think the point is his background, so he wasn't being brought in as like a character who knows a lot of stuff. So, and it may have been a joke I've slightly misunderstood, like maybe Elm's not helping, but so he's going to see who else does, and that's the joke.
Possibly. Anyway, so next time we will be returning to Rincewind and finding out exactly what happened at the end of Interesting Times to him with the Lost Continent. Hopefully.
Last Continent. You did this before.
Yeah, I keep doing this.
Last
Continent. Hopefully won't be such a...
I think it'll have to be better than Interesting Times.
Yes.
I get it. Similarly, it's only one where I remember Rincewind is in a place and there's some stuff, and that stuff is Australian.
Yeah.
This time, that's what I've got.
And so do I. That's pretty much my memories of it. It's
the wizards are on an island and there's like a god of evolution.
Yes. We shall see how we go with this one. So, with that, thank you all very much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Dining Table Discworld. You can find us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Dining Table Discworld. You can also find us on BlueSky at dtdiscworld. All our other contact information and credits for our music can be found in our show notes. Thank you for listening again, and we'll see you in our next episode.